Well, good afternoon. This is Mark Skidmore from the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. Today's webinar is entitled Workforce Issues Collaborating to Build Extension's Capacity. And I'm really happy to introduce Kenneth Sharon from South Dakota State University Extension and Cheryl Burkhart-Kriesel from Nebraska Extension. Kenneth is the Community Vitality Program Director at South Dakota State. And Cheryl is Extension Specialist at the Panhandle Research and Extension Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Welcome everyone to the webinar. For participants, if you have any questions or comments, you can type those into the webinar chat, and Kenneth and Cheryl can respond to them either as part of their presentation or at the end. And so with that, I would like to pass it on to Kenneth and Cheryl. Kenny and Cheryl, thanks again for pulling together this webinar. Thanks for being here. It's all yours.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. This is Kenny Sharon. I'm actually sitting on the campus of University of Minnesota. I'm having a meeting over here, so they've let me get some of their Wi-Fi, and I'm sitting in the office of a extension specialist here. But thank you. We're glad to be able to come together. We'll just go through the slides, and Cheryl will be jumping in after we go through the first two slides. So I'll let her introduce herself at that time. If you don't mind, it's interesting. I see the names of people joining in the chat box, so it will be on the recording. If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind sharing. Just type in where you're from and what organization you're representing today on the call. It's always able to make those connections down the road. So thank you, and we'll start with our presentation. The first thing we want to do is sort of talk about what we're going to talk about today. How do we get started on this interesting journey that we found ourselves on? Who's currently involved? We'll talk about some of the approaches that Extension is using in workforce development, and then who are our key audience and what are the future opportunities. So we'll dive right into that. First of all, I think Cheryl is going to give us a little background into how we got started on this journey. Cheryl, you want to take it over?
Sure, great. And thank you, Kenny. Also we have a number of people that are attending that are also a part of the team. So thanks for you guys to join in, and we'll just kind of keep rolling along here. So we need a little bit of background. How did we get down this path? And so actually for Kenny and I, it all started with a Rural Futures Institute grant, and that comes out of the University of Nebraska. And there was basically a research and extension component to it, and we were just fundamentally interested in working with employees and businesses and looking at how that workforce can be strengthened. So the grant actually brought together a team that was even broader than just Kenny and I. So in Nebraska, Carol Welty, an extension educator in Northeast Nebraska, was involved, and then Carolyn Hatch. And at the first, initially, she was a NCR CRD postdoc. Then she had moved to Purdue as a staff member there in extension. And then later, she really worked with us kind of on a one-to-one consultant role when she moved up to Montreal and worked on a manuscript with us. So Carolyn was really the key to provide some rich data on current and emerging jobs and industries and sort of who was doing the training for that position in both of these regions. And on the extension side, we really brought people together to discuss, brainstorm, and develop plans. So as we were going through this 2-year effort, what was real clear to us was the diversity of support that was needed. And so these clusters of counties are not that far apart, but they were all kind of needing different things at different times. And so it was just real easy for us to start thinking about, what are some of those promising practices that could be shared, who in extension was doing this, what resources are available. And we were just sure that others were involved. But to be honest, at that point in time in 2014 and 16, we didn't really have a good idea who those folks were. So if you're really interested in knowing a little bit more about this first project that sort of kicked off the effort for Kenny and I, there's two resources. One is the Rural Futures Institute, where that's the first link, Bridging the Skills Gap Introduction. But I would also encourage you to really look at a recent publication. It just came out in the Journal of Extension in April that would really give you a better, kind of more of a holistic perspective of what that first project was. So, you know, again, it immediately took us to asking those questions of, you know, what other states are doing, what's going on, in particular, who was doing it, and again, we were in need of resources, what resources were out there. So that, just like so many good things, it kind of led us down a path. So one of the first things we really did is we decided that, gosh, could we apply for an NCR-CRD small grant to bring people together in extension? And so we applied and were funded. And actually, we started gathering up people's names of who was interested, and we met informally, really, before the grant was official. We met at NACDEP at Burlington, Vermont, and just started brainstorming, you know, could we, you know, who all needs to be involved? How do we build this team? You know, what were some of our goals? What would we love to see happen? So again, we started that in Burlington. We actually, Kenny was at the CDS meeting in Minneapolis, and he had a presentation and also tried to network and build that list of names. And then we also just used informal networks within our states and regions. And so program leaders were a good source for us. Regional centers were also a good source. And we just started collecting names of people who are interested in workforce development and trying to put this together. Kenny?
Yes. Yeah. So here are some of the states that were listed that we've gotten information from. People have joined us in conversations. And this list probably is not even complete. When you start making lists, you often leave off people, but I made a graphical representation, just putting flags on a Google map. So, I mean, you can see this topic is wide-reaching. It's a topic that spans geographical areas of the country, and there's different issues in different parts of the state. So we've really gotten a lot of interest around workforce development, and we see this as a work that's in progress. So we hope to add more states as we go on down the road with this. So what were the first steps of? We called ourselves the Workforce Development in Extension Work Group, and we shortened it to WDO. Anyway, so we started asking the question, what is Extension doing in workforce development? And we wanted to collect that information. So I put together a simple Google form. We sort of vetted this among the folks working on this, and we deployed that survey as a mechanism to gather in the types of programs and types of resources that Extension were using in workforce development. And that link that's here, this form is still active, and if you have programs that you're using, I invite you to go and add those to that Google survey. And we're still interested in collecting more information. Like I said, this is a work in progress. So we tried to share it through program leaders, meetings, through national email list, but as you know, many people get many emails a day, and sometimes your marketing message gets just washed away in the river of other messages. So, like I said, if you have a program that you'd like to list, we please encourage you to do so we can include that into this index of what Extension is doing in workforce development. We had our off-the-grid workshop. We submitted a workshop, but it was not accepted at NACDEP last year. So we sort of went rogue and developed our own marketing and own way of bringing us together. at NACDEP last year. So here's some of the materials that we did that, and it ended up being a great group, and we were able to get some great work done at that workshop in Big Sky, Montana. So Cheryl's going to tell you a little bit about what we found at that workshop.
Okay, thanks, Kenny. And so one of the things, I mean, so folks over time had inputted this Google Docs survey, and so we have this laundry list of things, and really we had to make sense of it. We had to get our arms around it in some way. So there were lots of ways to slice and dice information like this, and so we did it actually a couple ways. One of the most productive, I think, is after we had kind of bounced a lot of ideas around, is really to think about, who are the audiences? And so we've sort of put these themes or categories together in terms of youth, young adults, adults and aging workforce, community and local government leaders, justice involved, or an older term that's used a lot of time are those that are incarcerated, immigrant populations, and veterans. And so this was one way that we could just kind of organize things a little bit. Another way that we really needed to look at this inventory of programs and resources was in more of a content manner. So, and what we found out is that the content can really vary a great deal. And so what we've got here really are sort of three approaches to content to give you some idea of the size and scope of what we had that came to us. So one was kind of a systems approach, and Missouri and Arkansas really partnered in developing this concept, but Missouri Extension right now is really seeming to take the lead of finding ways to embed extension efforts in a lot of different points in the workforce chain, starting way back with at the very beginning with young children and ending with older adults. So John Gulick would be the person to talk to or contact for more information, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, John is even on this call. So that would be one way to sort of think about content in terms of workforce development. Another approach, a little bit different approach, is what I would call the community approach, and it focuses on working in a community setting to set up partners, getting partners together and talking about local issues, and the roles each of the partners have in the entire workforce process. And typically you develop action plans to address opportunities. So this is really kind of a facilitation process with a kind of a workforce result. And the one, of course, I'm most familiar with, and Kenny and I are familiar with, is the one that we did with the Rural Futures Institute, where it was really bringing community conversations together and really rolling up your sleeves and thinking what you can do at the local level. And then finally, that last bullet is maybe what traditionally is thought of in terms of workforce development. It's really that technical skills, professional development, and it usually has kind of a workforce training emphasis of some sort. And it might be a certificate program or any kind of training that needs to be renewed or updated over time. So, in Nebraska, the things that come to mind for me are we have a child care providers conference that you can get credits for. There's in the food service, there's what's called Serve Safe. And even if you think on the ag side, our pesticide training really fits into this technical skill and professional development avenue as well. So as this grant was sort of ending, actually, and as we were going down this path, as people knew that there was a group kind of discussing and kind of inventorying workforce development resources, something kind of unexpected happened to us. Once people knew that this group was available, opportunities really seemed to come to the group. So here are two examples that I'd like to share. So Mark Skidmore and Rachel Welburn, along with other Rural Development Center directors, were meeting with the Department of Labor, and they wanted to share this inventory resource with that group to really show what Extension was doing in terms of workforce development. And then Brent Elrod, who's also on this webinar, he's really our community development rep with NIFA, USDA NIFA, wanted a summary, again, of those resources and programs of what the group was doing for inclusion in a National Rural Task Force report. So when opportunities start coming your direction, you really start feeling that you're going down the right path and that there's something there that we're doing right. So that was kind of affirming. We appreciated that. Then finally, we had one more that kind of came into play, and that was as the grant, though this small grant was winding down, we got an invitation to attend a Federal Reserve meeting in Austin, Texas on workforce development. So this grant really allowed Kenny and I to attend for the group and be the group's eyes and ears. So this was organized by several Federal Reserve locations. Everybody took a role. And besides Kenny and I, there were either 2 or 3 other extension professionals present. And this was maybe in a group of, I would guess, 300 to 500 people. Very national, lots of CEOs and CFOs present, and human resource officers of all different types. So it's quite a different conference than at least the ones that I normally traditionally attend. So we were at the right place at the right time to connect with a Federal Reserve staff member who just mentioned that he was putting together a book on workforce development. So this person had a previous relationship with Glenn Muskie, and we have to give Glenn credit here. Now, he was originally kind of had spent his career in Oklahoma and then kind of spent a few years in North Dakota, then retired. And this Federal Reserve person had worked with Glenn, and he was very impressed with extension. And during the conversation he had with Kenny and I, he basically asked if we could do something, put something together on the land grant's role in workforce development. So, of course, we did it, and it's coming out in November of this year, both in an online and a print version. So we weren't going to pass up that kind of an opportunity. Kenny.
Yes. So the next thing that we have going on is coming up next week, actually, at NACDEP. This year we put it in for a workshop again, and this time the workshop was accepted. If you're going to be at NACDEP, I encourage you to come by. We're the concurrent session number 2, Monday from 10:45 to 12:15 in the Holden Room. We will be offering a workshop talking about connecting, educating, and creating. We're going to have we've asked people that's been part of the team that's contributed information and programs talking about these different theme areas: youth and young adults, the adults and aging workforce, working with community and local governments, justice involved or incarcerated individuals coming back into the workforce, immigrant populations, and also veterans. So each, we're going to sort of focus and provide examples of how extension is working in each one of these theme areas. And then as a follow-up to the NACDEP presentations and the NACDEP workshops coming up this fall, we are going to do a webinar on each one of these topic areas. So be on the lookout for those webinars that will promote and drill down more in each one of these topic areas. So this webinar is designed to sort of give a broad overview. The webinars coming up this fall will drill down in each one of these topic areas, and you might be interested in one and maybe not so much in the other one. So be looking out for that. We're looking forward to providing those examples of great work that's being done, sort of almost a best practices type webinar and work that's being done in each one of these theme areas. So we look forward to that. So one of the things I wanted to highlight, and again, Brent is on this call. Brent really encouraged us as a group to highlight the opportunities to bring in veterans back into the workforce. There's several opportunities and has been opportunities. The one that has closed currently, but there was hope that funding would be renewed moving forward and bringing these opportunities for workforce military to come into the agricultural workforce. So Brett just typed in there is renewed funding, so that's great news there. So we're really encourage you to keep watch on that and bring those in. Brent's going to be at the NACDEP workshop if you want to talk with him a little bit more about that. So, and I know Brent would welcome any contacts if you want to find out more about that. So we really appreciate Brett's support during this whole process. He's really been involved from the very beginning because he has seen and knows that workforce development is a huge issue in the country and has been very supportive in our work and encouragement. So what's next for WDO? We are seeking to expand sort of our work and bring others on board. One of the ways we want to do this, and I don't know if anyone's on from the Western Rural Development Center region, but I want to talk to you if you are. So the Southern Rural Development Center, they sort of coordinate a broadband group and others initiatives. The North Central region is coordinating the CAPE project and working with opioid issues. For the Western Rural Development Center currently already has a rural workforce development initiative, and I've not reached out to Don over there as the director yet, but I'm hoping to find a home that we can provide some content for his region there. I'm in the North Central region, thus I'm on this call, but I think this is such a national issue. This would be a good fit for that initiative that's going on in the western part over there. So then coming up, what's next? The webinar is looking forward to this fall. And again, the survey link, here's the link. It'll be in the presentation. If you have a workforce development program that you would like to add to that survey, please do so. Currently, there's like 35 entries onto that survey, and if we do not have that into a format that's web friendly right now, I have it in an Excel spreadsheet. I'll be glad to send that Excel spreadsheet. If you contact me, I'll send it to you so you can see what people are doing. And that's one of the other things that I hope to get out there and put on the a website, is maybe even the Western Rural Development Center. So anyway, that information is here. So like Cheryl mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of momentum that's been generated, not just through this project, but when you start looking for workforce development things in Extension, you start finding them. For instance, some new things that's happening. Nebraska Extension has hired a specialist that is working on workforce development. Missouri, they've totally revamped their system and included workforce development in their whole ecosystem, really. And I noticed when John signed in that he even put that his new title involves workforce and labor issues. And Purdue, they've also made some headway in working on workforce development. So what's next? In doing just a casual Google search, I just typed in National Workforce Development Summit, and there are national organizations that work in the area of workforce. And looking at their programs and the conferences coming up, I did not see any Extension representation across the board. So we as a whole group, and I include the people on this webinar now as part of that group, we have to get the word out that Extension has a lot to offer. We should be at the table. We have programs that benefit communities, and we have to do a better job of getting ourselves and our resources and the word out there that we're a good resource when it comes to workforce development. And then I pose a question to you: where should we connect? What are some avenues of getting that word out there? feel free to type anything into the chat box there. We invite your input. That this is a work in progress, like I've said, and we should be working on how do we take the next step? Who do we connect with? How do we get more information about what's going on in workforce development? And where do we find avenues and ways that we can collaborate? And then how do we find those gaps so we can provide training and research that will support workforce development going forward? Let's see. Our next slide is so just sort of wrapping up. We have had a great workforce development and extension work group, the WDO. We thank you for all of those people that have contributed, been on these calls, doing this work. It's not always glamorous, but we've had some great contributors to this work, and their loyalty to the cause have been tremendous, and we appreciate their contributions. And if people wouldn't have not contributed their programs to the Google form, we wouldn't have anything to talk about. So I appreciate all those that contributed what they're doing in the realm of
yeah, Kenny.
Also, thank you for
both Tanya and Brent made some comments in the chat. So for Purdue, this is one of the top 5 focus areas. And then Brent mentioned that he just met with the Western Rural Development Center, and there's some interest in hosting that workforce development there. So that should be kind of fun, and we'll see where this all goes. Maybe we have a great conversation at NACDEP and see what happens.
Great. Thanks, Brent. Other questions for us as we...
Kenny and Cheryl, thanks for pulling together this information and sharing it. As we're waiting for others to type in their comments or questions, I was, I know you gave some examples of activities or types of activities that Extension is involved in the workforce development arena. Can you offer an example where there was a really great partnership where Extension played a role and communities played a role to try to move some aspect of workforce development forward?
Yes, I'll be glad to do that. At Purdue, I'll use Tanya and some of those folks from over there. They put together a curriculum that's called InWork. It's called InWork, Innovate, Invest, Inspire. This is working for building the skills needed. It's sort of a soft skills program that they've designed to target high school students and displaced adult workers. So that's an investment that system has made into working with that. Another model is in Montana, where Montana Extension partnered with, we called it sector partnerships. What they did is they looked at the manufacturing sector and partnered with them to provide ways.
Oh, go ahead.
That Extension.
I was just going to say, the soft skills are really, really important. As one example, I have a friend who runs a construction business, and he told me that, on any given project, he has to invite about 2 times the number of people to work on the project because he anticipates that about half of them won't even show up, even though they say they do. And so he has to adjust his workload schedule in that way so that, they have this attrition, this very high rate of attrition of people who don't even come, even though they say they will. Right. Those kinds of challenges are significant right now.
Right. Another. Right. Right. Another example is in Missouri. They have a program called Skill Up. Um, Skill Up takes some of the SNAP Ed dollars, and the extension has been able to capture those dollars and work with the SNAP Ed recipients of SNAP benefits to help them build capacity and skills to build their career, advance their career, or get a job. It's some soft skills, some technical training. So um, that information is there. So, and John has typed in
No, but
information about the
I did want
Department of Corrections, the work he's
comment
done
on Brent in the chat
through
asked if there was any engagement with the
Department of
USDA rural
Corrections there in
development at the
Missouri.
state or local level
Cheryl, do you have
yet.
some examples?
In Nebraska, not that I know
you-
of. I don't know Kenny or any of the other team members. If you've got something, please type in the chat. It looks like Tanya is typing in. So I think it's probably very state specific on how that interaction or how that connection happens, Brent. At least that's my, okay. Not in Indiana, at least not a strong partnership in this area. So maybe that's one of those things that we will see down the road, but it's not quite there yet. At least not in the places that we are most familiar with, I would guess. Right, definitely a place we can coordinate with.
The University of Minnesota has a 3-year grant project that they was funded by NIFA AFRI grant, and they're working on sort of the rural workforce, the entrepreneurial recruitment and retention. So that's something that they've been doing, that they've leveraged some funding to work on those areas in. So I'm sure contacting some folks there would be they would be willing to share about that. And then that focuses on who are the newcomers to rural areas. How is this research going to help bring other people to new areas as they think about recruiting workforce? So, including newcomers, new immigrant populations. How do they interact with existing communities, and how when they are invited in to work at a
and I see that Michael Darger is on the webinar as well, and he was one of the people that was with the extension that was actually at that Federal Reserve conference in Austin, Texas, and I believe one of the reasons he was there was to get kind of a sense of workforce development issues, and that their institution was going to be holding kind of a larger conference trying to think about how they contribute to workforce and maybe do it in a little bit different way. Quite often we become very academic, and so sometimes we have to think about things in a little bit different perspective. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Michael, if you want to jot something down, that'd be great.
While we're waiting for those additional questions to come in or comments, we do have the webinar summary evaluation here out for you to fill out, and we really appreciate your feedback on the webinar. I see Michael is typing. We'll just wait for another minute or two for that, and maybe after that it'll be a good time to close things out. And there's the comment from Michael.
So you can see, we really kind of bump into this topic in just a lot of different ways and a lot of different approaches. So this was just our effort to get things going, get things started, and to see if we can't move this topic and our visibility a little bit more deliberative down the way.
Michael is typing again. We'll wait for that. And you are happy to take questions or email if people want to follow up with you. And you can see.
And we do encourage folks to, if they can slip in and hit that workshop, that'd be great. You'll get a little bit better feel for some of these topics.
We have another comment coming in from Brent.
And Mark, is there a way to?
Yeah, we can get all of that information to you. We have this all recorded, so we can
emails
we'll
about
follow up and share all of that information.
Areas.
Okay. Well, thanks again. We see a couple of people have questions. Hiwat has a question about community colleges.
Fantastic.
So Kenny, you want to take that one, or you want me to?
I think you have an example, don't you? Or you know of something. I remember talking about community colleges. It's not direct a lot of times, Hiwat, but there are partnerships, I'm sure, that across areas. And in fact, my office literally is on the campus of a community college in South Dakota. So
it's probably one of those other areas we can do a lot more in.
Ancillary type things that happens, but not directly.
Well, okay. Well, thanks for a great presentation, Kenny and Cheryl, and thanks everyone for joining us. We'll have this recording out for folks as well if they want to catch it later on. And with that, we'll close out. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Mark.